How's life?
Going well, going well. How about yourself?
Oh, you know me. I spread sunshine wherever I go. All right, let's get these questions up here. Okay. All right. I saw you. Who's the guy? Will Chamberlain that you cornered at
Yes,
CPAC?
yes. Will Chamberlain.
What's his deal? He's just a neocon.
Yeah, he's one of these. Well, he's half Jewish, so he thinks, Israel's entitled to all this foreign aid money. And we actually had a big debate about that in the fall, but he wanted to rehash it on the floor of CPAC.
Wow. How? I mean, are the people there likable at CPAC? Because I
No,
mean,
no.
I got a problem with the word conservative because it sounds tight-assed to me, like uptight.
Hmm.
So I've never identified as that, but I'm sure they
Hmm.
wouldn't want me anyway. But I can't see it being a lot of fun. You had fun though?
Well, I had fun mostly because I was antagonizing those kinds of people,
Right.
because it's all these like millennials in these, in their trendy suits, and they're all very well manicured and everything, and their ideology is like wars in the Middle East and low taxes. So it's just fun to bust their balls a little bit.
How do you have low taxes if you're going to have wars in the Middle East all the time?
Great question.
Don't they cost like
Great question.
trillions of dollars? They're not
Yeah,
saving cats from trees, for fuck's sake. Okay.
right.
I'm here on the farm in Georgia with Nick the Knife Fuentes. You're in Chicago?
That's right.
Uh,
Suburbs of Chicago.
Suburbs of Chicago. So you're away from the South Side and Gary, Indiana, and all that.
Yes, yes. Very far removed from the violence.
Nice. And you're from the Midwest originally, or
Yeah, yeah. I grew up here.
okay, all right. You like it?
I do. I love it. I have to say, even I was just driving around the other night and thinking about how, what a great place it is. One of the last vestiges in many cases of how the country used to be.
Are you always this happy? Do you ever get depressed? You always seem like very, very happy.
Well, I think that's just more in the presentation. But yeah, no, if you ever catch me posting at 2, 3, 4 a.m., we can get a little melancholy, a little bit wistful, but
Okay, those are the dark hours for you.
that's
Gotcha.
right.
So everyone calls you alt right, but you don't identify as alt right.
Right. Yeah,
What are
exactly.
the distinctions?
So I think the biggest distinction is, you have to define the alt-right, which is a term that was coined by Paul Gottfried and Richard Spencer.
Yes.
And if you look at Richard Spencer and what he preaches, it's something that I think we have a lot of the same concerns about the country in terms of identity, in terms of race, in terms of some of these other questions. But his prescription for how we address that is this post-American kind of like Francis Yockey type solution. I think a lot of influences from Alexander Dugin and kind of these different positions in politics. And my approach to it has been more the Pat Buchanan or the Sam Francis approach, which is sort of restoring more traditionalist America. And so I think that's really the distinction.
Do you think that's possible?
I don't know. I think that's something that remains to be seen. I certainly think it's going to be challenging, probably near impossible, but I think it's worth trying.
Because I saw it was Peter Brimelow recently said that in his mind he's a civic nationalist, but his heart he thinks what we reached a point of no return that America's too big to work. I don't know. I'm a pessimist by nature, but I kind of feel the same way. I think it's beyond salvaging. But it's good that you have optimism. Is pessimism part of being a boomer? Because here's the deal. I'm one of 4 kids. I was a mistake. I was 12 years after my nearest sibling. They were all like baby boomers from the 40s. I was born in 61 at the tail end of it. I think you're still a teenager, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'm 19.
All right, I'll be 50. I'll be 3 times your age in June. So, and the reason we wanted to talk is I saw you did this. You just devastated this Halsey English guy, this tough, or wanting to appear tough, pro-gun, Republican, Zionist, conservative guy. And the first
Yeah.
thing you said was, "Okay, you fat boomer faggot." And
Yes.
faggot, maybe fat, undeniably. What I always wonder is like, why? Like, what's the animus toward the boomers? What did they do wrong?
Well, there is this huge animus, I think, in the dissident right, particularly among young people, but also with old people towards the boomers, because we see them as really the generation that let it all go to hell. We see them as, right around the time that they came of age, which would have been the youngest boomers would have been what, like 1965, that would have turned 20, or the oldest boomers.
Right, right.
And you see that from 65, you see all kinds of pernicious trends begin, whether it's immigration, whether it's these social trends with the advent of birth control and the sexual revolution, this youth activism stuff, this anti-establishment, anti-Christianity stuff. And so we really see this generation as having failed in their stewardship of the country. They did not leave it in a better condition than they found it, and they found it in a pretty good condition. So I think there is this sort of you mortgaged our future so you could like have sex at a rock concert kind of mentality among young people, a bitterness.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I understand, but like, fuck, should I blame, what would it be, Generation X or the millennials, the fact that Obama doubled the debt? I guess where I have a problem, it's like, I think people are more shaped, generations are more shaped by their circumstances than they shape history. And I think, the boomers, I guess, they just inherited a lot of fat and wealth. And I think most people would probably take advantage of that. And I realize over the long arc of my life, I realize how much worse. I mean, at least I have that perspective, how much worse things have gotten. My dad lived in the Great Depression and dropped bombs on Germany in World War II, didn't get any credit for it. But fuck, when he was my age, without a high school diploma, he had paid off a house in cash, got a new car every 3 years. My mom didn't have to work. And so when I went to see Trump talk Make America Great Again, that's what I was thinking about. Not beating up or whatever. People think that's what, I mean, these motivations that they ascribe, you wonder what's in their minds, like if that's all they see. But yeah, I mean, my dad, I guess, was a product of the Great Depression. He had his attitudes, and I remember he was a plumber, freelance plumber, 40 hours a week, and he worked at Gulf Oil. He was an oil refinery foreman. And even then, they started hiring blacks. He's like, oh, they're all lazy, and they brag about it. And so he dealt with the hand he was given. But like, if we talk about what is it now? Generation Z? What's that? The teenagers?
Yeah, they think that's 95 and onward.
Aren't they all trannies and like more liberal than ever?
Well, yeah, and that's kind of where we take issue with boomers who will go on television and Fox News. I mean, this is really kind of the classical trope is these kind of older people online or on television and saying, well, millennials are entitled, millennials are in their basement, or, Generation Z has all these problems. And we see that as almost a direct result of the world that boomers created. You look at, for example, academia, or you look at the economic situation, and in many cases, these are boomers that are running the show there, boomers who have all the wealth in the economy, boomers who put in place these different academics. And I do think you're right about like different generations being a victim of circumstance in the sense that boomers came up in a very good time, and that tends to breed weakness and complacency.
Right.
So I definitely understand that, but I think we kind of detest what the boomer represents, maybe. So maybe it's not so much like, individuated boomers that we say, like, you're personally responsible, but we say we detest the weakness, the complacency, and what has transpired.
I think, I mean, I'm sure you've heard it plenty of times, like if a lot of the British soldiers in World War II knew what would have happened, they never would have fought. And I think that might be gone. Even the idiots who voted for Obama thinking, I mean, I knew that it was not going to get less racial. These people thought, oh, we'll be done with it. And then it got, it was not the post-racial, it was the most racial. I think in a lot of these cases, these people decisions are made for them. They don't even know what they're voting for half the time. And I think it was done by sleight in a lot of ways, sleight of hand behind their backs. I mean, I've always felt that decisions are made for me. I voted for Trump. Only time I ever voted for anyone who got elected. And then he goes and bombs Syria. It's like, fuck, I didn't choose that. And he's probably going to compromise on all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, I'm just a little bit sus because I don't think I really have that much control over things. I open my mouth, but that's about all I can do. But yeah, free sex. So the trad Generation Z people, they're against degeneracy. Would that be the word?
Yes, exactly. We are staunchly opposed to degeneracy.
That was one of the things, I mean, I fell in love with Trump when the whole Megyn Kelly thing happened. He's like, I wasn't talking about her vagina. Only a deviant would think that. I'm like, wow. When was the last time somebody in power used the word deviant?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Great, like deviant. But yeah, I mean, there's all this talk about punching right. Do you think you're going to like alienate generations just by being hostile toward the boomers? And again, I'm not here to defend them. I go my own way. I don't fit in anywhere. What's that?
Yes, you're pushing back a little bit. That's okay. That's what has to happen. But no, I think a lot of boomers recognize the contention that we're making. I think a lot of because to lay blame at the feet of an entire generation is a little bit cartoonish. You know, my dad always says this. There's really not a whole lot that binds together all the people in the country that were born between like 1945 and 1965, but it is sort of representative of this largesse of an America that's kind of conceded and surrendered to their impulses and to these other things. And so I think even a lot of boomers understand where we're coming from. I'm going to speak at American Renaissance about this, and Jared Taylor was saying, like, yeah, my generation has been a problem. We have, done a lot of things. And so I don't think so. I think a lot of, even if you look at the analytics for my show, a lot of boomers watch my show on YouTube. And I think they understand where the country has gone awry. And maybe they also understand it, like you said, that the decisions were made for them. You know, particularly if you look at the 65 Immigration Act, if you look at what voters were told about that, they were told explicitly that the opposite of what happened would happen. They said it wouldn't increase and it wouldn't change the composition of the country. And, of course, that was a lie. And even the politicians didn't understand that. So I don't think I do think, maybe some people will take offense, but I think generally people get the sentiment.
Okay. Ben Shapiro. Two words here. He put me on a list a couple of years ago. Somebody asked him who was in the alt-right, and he said, well, here's a list of alt-right and alt-right friendly people. I was on there, a bunch of other people. So he made, his little Schindler's List and put me on it. I can't fucking stand that guy. He's smarmy, he's smackable. But the big thing, and I think like if you were to debate him, you'd demolish him. How do you reconcile being against identity politics and being a Zionist at the same time?
Exactly. Well, exactly. That's the fundamental question that needs to be asked. And I've said that on my show because I've been going after, well, Ben Shapiro actually started coming after me, and then I responded in kind. And for a long time, I've said I want to debate him. We have to have this conversation. And I boiled it down essentially to that single question, which destroys his worldview, destroys his entire advocacy for his political beliefs and everything, which is, how can you say that America is not entitled to ethnic nationalism? How can you say that identity politics is nonsense or evil or immoral when you're an unabashed Zionist? You believe in an ethnic country for Israel. It's the Jewish state of Israel. And, he came close to answering that the other weekend. I think there was an article about it in his website, Daily Wire, where somebody said, Ben, you support Israel. You're proud of your Jewish heritage, but you're against identity politics here. Like, what gives? And he gave this answer, which I think is remarkable. He said, well, Judaism is a religion, not a race, which is rich.
The big lie. The big lie.
Exactly. And then he says, and that means that Israel is a creedal and not an ethnic nation, because we have all kinds of Jews here. And he's just such a lying rat. I'm so with you. I'm so against that.
Did they ever make into law that thing about DNA tests for citizenship? You have to have Ashkenazi DNA.
Yeah, I don't think they actually put that in, but, it's certainly discussed. And, are they assessing religious devotion with the DNA test for immigration, or is it something else? Because
the always misquoted passage that Hitler about the big lie he said was that Jews are a religion and not a race.
Right.
But it's fascinating to me that a big lie has been told about the big lie, because if you look that up online, 99 out of 100 times, oh yeah, that's something that Hitler and Goebbels preached as a method of deceiving the people. It's like, I don't know what kind of politician would survive if they came out and said that. So that's kind of dumb. But yeah, the actual passage is about the Jews saying they're a religion, not a race. So he says his people. I mean, do Christians say my people when they refer to Christians?
Yeah, no, I don't usually hear that. Even among white people. You don't really hear that among Americans.
Yeah, I mean, my peeps. So Ben, yeah, I would love. I mean, one day it's going to happen. And so he came after you first for what?
Well, so this all started where I met some of his friends like Cassie Dillon, Elliot Hamilton, Aaron Bandler, these different Zionist shills who work at Daily Wire, because I was this like up and coming conservative on campus at Boston University. And so I was a part of this collection of people on the Daily Wire, and they kind of knew me, and they wanted me to meet Ben because they said I had a lot of potential, maybe work for Daily Wire. And this is before I was really raising my power level in terms of what I knew about what was going on with this particular tribe, with this country. And so I would just begin tweeting. I think it was around December of last year. about how absurd it is that we give Israel this much money every year. And forget what you believe about Zionism or what you believe about Jews. It simply cannot be justified on any grounds. And he would retweet me and say that it's anti-Semitic to suggest that Jews have dual loyalty and blah, 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 this and that. And I would tweet about free trade and how it's nonsense, and these different countries are pillaging our manufacturing and our industry. And he retweeted me and said, well, you have a trade deficit with your grocery store. Is that, going to be a problem? And so he really retweeted me. And then that was kind of our first interaction. And then this came full circle back over the summer after I made enemies out of everybody at Daily Wire, and Ben in particular. Cassie Dillon caught a clip of me that was filmed by somebody, which in a private conversation, where I said something to the effect that race mixing is degenerate and, Jews are maybe a negative influence in the media. And he retweeted that clip to his 1 million followers, concern trolling, saying, nice. If this is real, this is really troubling. And so that he did come after me in many ways.
So he used the term anti-Semitic. Semites are a race, though, right?
Right.
Because otherwise, how could you have atheist Jews?
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And also, the Semitic people also includes Arabs,
Palestinians, right?
Ethiopians. Yeah. So
Ethiopians, wow. Okay, so you were at Unite the Right.
I was at Charlottesville.
And what did you see?
I saw a lot of different things. What did I see? A lot of Confederate flags, a lot of Identity Europa type people. It was really a pretty mixed bag, because you would get kind of these like white nationalist 1.0 characters from like West Virginia with like SS tattooed on the back of their neck, huge people. But then you'd also I met like a ton of young people from Canada, just like young college kids, dressed normally, look normally. So it was a pretty big variety of people, but a lot of them undesirable, a lot of them, not so great looking.
I watched the live streams the whole day, and from what I saw, it was mostly leftist violence.
Yep. You're right about that.
I mean, I'm sure there were a couple knuckleheads, but what bugs the shit out of me, and I might do a book about this, the press got everything wrong about that.
Yep.
Like anything they could have possibly gotten wrong, they got wrong. And even holding Trump's feet to the fire. Oh, you said they're great Nazis. That's not what he said. He said there were good people on both sides. And isn't that like what being a liberal is supposed to? You're all human.
Yeah.
No, they just wanted everything condemned. Have you been? Has Luke O'Brien or Michael Edison Hayden ever gone after you? Do you know these guys?
No, I don't know those people.
Luke O'Brien's some sad sack. He writes for Huffington Post. He's stalking Anglin. And Michael Edison Hayden is this guy. I think he's part Coptic Christian or something. He's Middle Eastern in descent, apparently. Phenotypically, it looks like. But he's their hitman for the alt-right on Newsweek. And he mangles and fucks up just about every fact he gets. And he's on Gab all the time harassing everyone. It's like, wait a minute. I thought you were a reporter. Like, you use the word Nazi for everyone. He contacted me out of the blue a couple months ago. He's like, so, hey, you still believe this conspiracy theory that Heather Heyer died of a heart attack? And I said, it's not a matter of belief. Like, oh, you believe that some people's IQ, it's like, that's what the tests show. It's not a belief. This is what her mom told NBC News. Here's the video. That's all I ever said. He's like, well, the coroner's report said she died of blunt chest trauma. I'm like, well, where's the coroner's report? And he showed me some newspaper article. I'm like, that's not a coroner's report. It's like, look, man, I may be a maniac, but I'm trained in journalism. I know what a source is. Where's the coroner's report? And he said he'd get back to me. He never got back. But then a month later, he's like, I guess he ran away like a coward because I debunked his ridiculous conspiracy. It's like, wait a minute, mister. It's like, number one, like, this is what her mom said. Number two, how does a Dodge Challenger hit a grown woman in the chest?
Yeah.
But he just, no honor in these guys. That's what bugs me. It's not, I always make this clear, and not like from a virtuous, it's just the way I'm strung out. I'm not a my people type of guy. Liars bug the shit out of me, though, and they're doing nothing but lying. I saw this. And it triggers ancient memories in my boomer head of being stalked by anti-racist skinheads in Portland.
Yeah, no, it's true, and I've gotten those kinds of these left-wing parasite people come after me. I mean, they really are the lowest of the low. These people are scum because they wouldn't exist without people like us. They exist solely to report on, what other people do. We do, and they gossip. They do their little gossip column about what we do with the slanderous names, and they garble the facts. And these are just the lowest of the low parasites. I'm so with you on that.
Or cites the SPLC as a reliable source. This is what I was thinking, too, because I did a graphic, because I looked it up, and I'm like, all right, because every time the NRA comes up, and I'm not even allowed to have a gun, I'm a felon, but gun rights, okay, every time the NRA comes up, I've never seen the media cite the NRA as a source on anything. All they ever say is they're a powerful lobby. You can't get around them. They've got a lot of money, and it's the most powerful lobby. So I looked up the net assets for 2015, 2016. SPLC, $319 million. NRA, $75 million. They've got more than 4 times as much money. And the media gullibly reprints everything that comes off their press release as fact. How are you a reporter? It's like, well, hate's what motivates these people. I would have been thrown out of journalism class for that shit. You can't read people's minds, but they break every fucking rule. And that's why I'm in this game at this point, because possibly autistic and liars bug the shit out of me. So, Unite the Right. You were one of the ones critical of the optics.
Yes. Well, I looked at Unite the Right, and I was on the ground. I was there. I thought it was important for this movement to transition from online to real activism, to take it into the streets. At least that's what I thought going into it. And then I saw the rally. I saw the consequences of it. Like my friend Baked Alaska, who almost lost his eyesight, people getting kicked off Twitter, their websites shut down. I mean, there was a severe backlash against our movement, people losing jobs. I mean, and I'm sure you're familiar with all of that. And I thought to myself, what was the outcome? What did we gain from that? And if we're going to do that in the future, to what end? People were talking about Charlottesville 3.0, where they came back, I think, a month later with the torch march at night. And then there was the Gainesville speech, and then there was this march on the Jefferson Monument. And at the time, I was doing my podcast with James Alsop, and he's a big Spencer acolyte. He loves to kind of kiss his ass and worship the ground he walks on. And so he was the big cheerleader for it. Oh, Charlottesville 3.0 is a big success, and this is great. And I just started to ask very simple questions. To what end? What are we achieving with this? And the only answer I could get from people was, we're raising the white consciousness, or, this kind of intangible stuff. And so at that point, I said, we cannot be going out there doing these offensive, ridiculous things that normal people would reject and not have any goals in mind, not have, any tangible outcome in mind when we're doing that. And so I was very critical of the optics from that perspective.
But the immediate reaction, deliberate terrorist car plowing, where they would never say what was it, a week earlier in Nice or whatever, 87 people mowed over by a bus deliberately, like a guy goes up onto the sidewalk. But you see these I guess they're all ages, boomers, millennials, Generation Z. Everyone they know is either dying of a heroin overdose or, dying in a car crash from drinking too much. They're suddenly upset over this 400-pound woman's death. And they don't have a problem with anything else. I mean, they claim to believe in equality, but they don't count bodies equally. If they did, they'd be much more upset about hamburgers than some stupid rally. And, so if Antifa wasn't there, do you think anything bad would have happened?
No, not at all. And that's what I said the story should have been. Well, the story that the media should have been covering, if they were journalists, was the fact that the government, the state government, and the local government colluded with left-wing terrorists to shut down free speech. We had a permit that was a lawful assembly. We came to give speeches, to organize, and the government unconstitutionally shut it down. They said, oh, it's a state of emergency, so we can disassemble the protest. And not only that, but the police report that came out in December said that the police were ordered deliberately not to break up fights, to push the alt-right people into the mob of the left wing, the Antifa-type agitators. And so it was Antifa, and it was also the police. And everybody wanted to talk about the one guy, the Fed, with the crinkled-up Nazi flag.
Right,
they didn't
right.
want to talk
with the fresh
about
creases, right.
Exactly. So
now, when I interviewed Richard Spencer about this, I'm like, well, how is it legal to tell the cops to stand down? And he's like, it's not.
Right.
So how do they get away with it? Any idea?
Well,
is they just flaunting it or flouting the law like in front of everyone's face? And as far as journalism goes, in the wake of this, like, okay, VDare, Peter Brimelow. To me, he looks like he's Peter Noon from Herman's Hermits, still touring. He's got that mid-60s British invasion haircut.
Right.
Very scholarly guy. He's got best-selling authors, Pat Buchanan, Ann Coulter. I've never seen the word nigger on their site. They had nothing to do with Charlottesville. I think within a week, PayPal cut the cord on them. Mm-hmm. And that's happened to Jared Taylor now on Twitter. And you talked about that. They go after him because he's smart and likable?
Yeah, because he's presentable, I think.
Why isn't, I mean, and what's that you mentioned? Baked Alaska just had his streaming yanked for 3 months, as did Worski. Mm. If there were any journalists left in the country, this would be the biggest story in the country. A huge group of people, and they're not, and now they're going after what idiots like Sargon and stuff. Mm-hmm. They're letting like half the political they're silencing, neutering. If there was anybody who really cared about facts, this would be a huge story, but it just gets buried. Nazi. All they have to do at this point is say Nazi, and people are so conditioned, they freak the fuck out. But it's I don't know. To me, the rebel in me, it's like it just makes being a Nazi more and more attractive, optics or not. But like what you said about you can't blame an entire generation. That's what I said in a note to you. Like it is sort of like slow motion astrology because you're going to get outliers in any generation. Boomers, yeah. I guess my brother. God, how do I? Skirting a line here. My brother will turn 70 this year. He was in Vietnam, and when I knew him as a kid, he was a hot rodder. He took me to see the drag races at Acco, New Jersey. He took me to see slasher movies and Russ Meyer movies, like the nudie cuties, the rough ones. And guy was full of life in the 60s. Was a cliff diver. He went to Vietnam and fucking destroyed him. And he got in a car accident in the mid-'80s, went on painkillers, never came back.
Jeez.
Last I knew, legally prescribed, and he wears his Vietnam vet cap with pride, and I'm not sure why, because I think that's the first one the U.S. clearly lost. But every day, like legally prescribed, 3 hits of morphine, 4 Vicodins, antidepressants, anti-anxiety, muscle relaxers, Ambien, a couple others too. And the guy's a zombie. He's kind of a purposeless boomer who's been destroyed by everything that he bought into. Yeah. He's just a husk of a person. It's kind of tragic, but at the same time, I'm kind of pissed off what he let become of him. But I guess a lot of those people, they were sold a dream which they were nice enough and stupid enough to believe in and got swindled. I guess the ones that I'd be pissed off are the ones who still double down with the cognitive dissonance. They see everything that's happening. Because like I said, I'm old enough. I remember when things were much nicer. My old man, he was a raging alcoholic without a high school education, but could support a family of 4 and a wife that didn't have to work, just regardless. And that's everything that's been sold out. In my Redneck Manifesto book in the 90s, I said that, everything you see on TV is just, Jerry Springer's jet skiing with Holocaust survivors. Everything's about race. But the big story I said in the 90s was outsourcing. They're sending the jobs elsewhere. And that's what's going to cut the country apart. And when I went to see Trump speak, that's all he talked about was Carrier going to Mexico, iPhones being made in China. All they talk about is race. And I'm starting to form this grand theory. It's like, well, I think they conditioned everyone to be horrified about racism, to shut them the fuck up for noticing what's happening to them. They're intentionally being displaced. I mean, if I was a robber baron capitalist, I'd hire Malaysians for $2 an hour. I wouldn't care about my peeps. But I think this whole racial hysteria has just been psychologically terrorizing people into shutting up about having everything taken from them. Make sense? No?
It's true. It's 100% true. If you look at how political correctness functions and what falls under correct and incorrect, that's how it was designed. And I always talk about on my show, regardless of what you think about the bad thing that happened 70 or 80 years ago, regardless of what you think about the bad man, it's a very important mythology for the left. We heard the other day, for example, that one of the people who was at Stoneman Douglas High School, she takes Holocaust class every day with that bald mulatto who's out there preaching gun control. And you think about how important this mythology is for the left, Hitler and the Holocaust. Anytime you would argue about ethnic nationalism, anytime you might argue that races are different, or that our race is different in different ways, and so on and so forth. Maybe this country should be for one people. Maybe we like our people. What does it always get relegated back to? It always goes back to, oh, I don't know, that sounds a lot like the bad guy. Because I remember in college even, I was in a class and we were discussing Plato. We were discussing the Republic. And in that book, Plato talks about eugenics. And the professor was Jewish, and we were talking about it. And she goes, oh, well, so Plato's basically a eugenicist. And isn't that goofy? And I go, okay, but what exactly is wrong with that? I mean, Schopenhauer said eugenics would work. All kinds of people said.
Everyone.
Isn't it?
You know,
right.
The progressives of 100 years ago, that's all they talked about. There's so many leaps of logic. I mean, you know what Heckler's veto is, right? This is, I guess it's like Hitler's veto. You can't even say people are different without having a Holocaust.
Exactly.
It's like, that's kind of like mental premature ejaculation. Like, no, it doesn't. Because, I mean, I used to be liberal. I was the world's first Whigger in the 80s. And I mean, I copped to it. World's first ex-Whigger. I believed people are unequal for evolutionary reasons for about a quarter century now. The only people I've wanted to harm are the people who want to jail me for thinking that. Right. It's like, now we got a problem. As far as like hating black people, it's like, no, they're different. They've got the fast twitch muscle fiber. Evolution gave them certain gifts that I don't have. Jews, yeah, I mean, even Hitler said they were smart, no denying it, but they're human, so they can be assholes. Like, again, like, haven't wanted to oppress anyone except the totalitarians who want to cut your tongue off for speaking what you feel is the truth. That's why I think it's so tragic what happened to this blood sport thing. They've been shut down. That was the only interesting thing going on in the internet. That's what I've wanted to do for a generation now, but look, you can't get takers. I'd actually like to see them get some leftists on there. That would be great, but the left doesn't want to argue. They're so morally convinced they're in the right that there's no argument to be had. It's like, period, end of sentence, case closed. But it sucks. I mean, I'd love to see people arguing all the time. I think people get along if they were able to argue.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And even on the right, you see it. Even on the right, it's funny how blood sports has kind of co-opted the free speech stuff that these campus conservatives, these conservative Inc. type people would talk about. You know, for example, you'd get Dave Rubin, who is just the epitome of just lowbrow mediocrity. And he started his show with the intention of, like, this is the show where people come on and we talk about ideas. And, I only have one idea, which is that I'm the real liberal and blah, blah, blah. And his whole premise was this was going to be free speech, just talking about ideas. And then you realize very quickly it was only certain ideas that get on. Certain ideas that don't really meet the kosher standard, they don't get on. And it's funny because that was their whole shtick. Shapiro, Rubin, were the free speech people, were the free speech crusaders, and they got the rug pulled out from under them by Andy Worski and JF, this eclectic collection of people, because we were actually willing to go there. We were actually willing to argue the things that aren't allowed, not the things, not like this, oh, I know it's really controversial, but I support the nation of Israel, but actual controversial stuff. So it's both the left and the right. The blood sports scares away people who want the money. It scares away the people who want the corporate, the who money, who won't touch that with an iron, with a long stick.
Dave Rubin is just so screamingly bland to me. He used to be one of the Young Turks or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And he had, I'm not even going to name names. Who's that gay guy who looks like Duran Duran, who sucks dick and comes off
Milo?
Yeah, I don't want to. But even he was on that show, and he's, we do. Us Jews do. And he's like, nope, come on, I'm getting uncomfortable. Like, he didn't even want to talk about disproportionate media representation. It's like, well, right. that should be a starting point. Because, like, with all the, Oscars so white, it's like, come on. Like, you really... Well, do you know who David Cole is, the world's first and last Jewish Holocaust revisionist?
No.
I knew this guy like 25 years ago. He went to Auschwitz, and he inherited some huge cache of all this Holocaust revisionist material, and he became a committed Holocaust revisionist. And even now, he pretty much was depersoned. Irv Rubin of the JDL stalked, had him beat up a few times. He had to fake his own death. But even today, he's like, well, I'm Jewish. I don't like Nazis. I've done a bunch of research. I think Operation Reinhard in Poland intentionally probably took about 2.5, 3 million Jews out, but there were no gas chambers. I mean, saying stuff that still you could get arrested for. I would like to have conversations with that type of, where you can't even challenge the narrative. I've said this many times. You might be too young to remember Sam Kinison, the screaming comedian. He was like an 80s, 90s thing. He always had this line, I didn't even want to fuck you in the ass until you told me I couldn't. So I wasn't curious about the Holocaust until you made it illegal to question it in 16 countries. But that's, to me, the big tragedy that happened right the moment Trump got elected, was this immediate schism between light and right. And so you had an encounter with this, who's this Posobiec guy?
Yeah, Jack Posobiec.
What is, I don't even understand what he represents. He's just a neocon who swears? Like, what's...
Yeah, God knows what. He's just the MAGA-pede. He's your archetypal MAGA-pede, which is, just some opportunist who latched onto the movement. I mean, he's like Cernovich. They stand for nothing. They want to sell books. They want to get people to watch their live streams. Has he ever read any piece of political theory? No, but he likes the money.
Well, I remember hearing Spencer say this. I think it was a week before Charlottesville. It's like, there's no bigger enemy to us right now than the alt-right. The left is always going to be there. They're always going to be the left. But these guys are the worst. And he said there's no serious thinkers. Now, someone like Cernovich, like guerrilla mindset? You kidding me? And this is a guy, they're such latecomers, too.
Right.
And I guess, I guess very good at being an opportunist. But I don't think any of those guys would last 5-10 minutes in one of those blood sports.
No, that's why they don't do them. That's why they make it policy not to do debates. You'll never find any of them in a debate. Because you look at where they came from, even Milo, who was maybe the high watermark of alt-right, the high watermark of this kind of new faction, even he was like a tech writer until 2015. He was a tech journalist in the UK until he discovered that he jumped onto the momentum of the Trump campaign and the Trump election. Mike Cernovich was from the pickup artist community, or the manosphere, basically, until he jumped on. And Jack Posobiec was some Fed, basically, from the Navy, and on. Cassandra Fairbanks, God knows what the hell was going on over there. And so these are all opportunists. The alt-right, say what you will about Spencer and Jared Taylor and some of these guys about optics or whatever. They've been doing it for decades. Spencer's been out there talking about this stuff for a long time, about politics and theory, and he went to school for it. He was in Europe studying it. So at the very least, you have to give them credit that they are presenting a real alternative, a real and a coherent ideology, as opposed to this kind of this reheated book merchant stuff.
And maybe it's because their ideas are so repressed. I don't see them ever shirking away from a debate, or at least an invitation to discuss them. Now, everything I will always say is self-serving. I might have come up accidentally with likening debating to a blood sport. I did an article in 2011 called "Invasion of the Koch-Pussies." It was about people who were blaming the Koch brothers for everything. And there's this guy who called me out about something I said about the Wisconsin teachers. Like, hey, let's discuss it. And he wouldn't. And he went low, which is easy to do with me. I give people plenty of reasons to hate me. But I said, this is why I love to argue. I approach it like a blood sport. But this guy never took it up. I would have mopped the floor with him. Easy discussion about Wisconsin teachers. Instead, he went for my past. We found out this guy bragged in print when he was in his 30s of fucking a 15-year-old. And pretty much demolished him. He's still trying to have a career as a writer. And he's saying, no, that was obviously satirical and you're an idiot for that. But it's like, well, you did it in a book that said it was a work of nonfiction and that everything described in here happened. And you wrote it under your own name. And you want us to think it's a modest proposal. But my God, I would relish confronting the guy 5 minutes, 10 minutes. That's just part of my spirit. So the blood sports, they don't even want that now. And it's fucking depressing. But one day, please, Ben Shapiro, corner him if you have to. You would demolish the guy. You're the chosen one. You're the anointed one for that.
It's my life's mission. I've been trying to do it, and I'll get my match with him. I know it every day. That's why I do the show. I should get a picture of him to hang on my wall, so every day I can point to it. That's WrestleMania for me. That's what we're headed for. Yeah,
please demolish him. And hey, don't be so fucking ageist, man. That's one of these innate things, It's like being trans or being black. We can't help it. All right.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Have a good one, man.
You too, man. Take it easy. Thanks for having me.
All right.